Hi all, I'm really excited to be with you here today. If you're not familiar with CoGenerate, we are a national nonprofit that supports older and younger change makers working together to solve problems, bridge divides, particularly the age divide, and co-create a better future. When we use the word cogenerate, which you're going to hear a lot today, we are referring to the act of cross-generational collaboration for social impact. If you are a regular at our webinars, welcome back. Perhaps you've come today because you're connected to the work of our special guests, Alissa and Alex. I have known Alissa Quart for many years through mutual journalism circles, and I have admired her and her work for quite a long time. Alex Miller, our second guest, I've only recently gotten to know through his work with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, the organization that connects them both. And I'll introduce them shortly, but I'm just going to give you a sense of what we're going to do here together. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes with Alex and Alissa. Then we want to hear from all of you. So as the conversation unfolds, if there are issues coming up for you, questions, something you want to share or ask, pop it into the chat as you are doing right now with where you're coming from, because we may be able to weave some of those things right into the conversation as it's happening, or we'll save them for the Q&A period. My colleague, Christina, show your face and wave, Christina. You'll be meeting her soon. She's going to join us about 40 minutes into the conversation to get you into the conversation, to get some Q&A, and to hear if anything you're working on sounds like what we've been talking about here today. I also want to give a shout out to our colleague, Duncan, who handles all things tech, who is our Zoom master. He is really adept at making sure these things happen glitch-free. And so now I can introduce you to our panelists, and we'll take this forward. So I'm going to introduce you both, and I'm going to say your age because it's part of how we're talking about our topic today. So Alissa, you are 51, and you are the CEO of the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. You are also the author of many books, 5 nonfiction and 2 poetry, which is kind of incredible, including the most recently released Bootstrapped, which I read a couple of months ago and can't get out of my mind, and I've been recommending it widely to everyone I talk about. It is, the subtitle is Liberating Ourselves from the American Dream, and it's really debunking the myth that we get here by ourselves in what we accomplish in the world. Alex, who is now 37, is a Navy veteran, a journalist, and essayist with bylines in many publications, including, at least the ones I've read, Newsweek, Esquire, Wired, just last week, Fast Company. He is currently a reporting fellow with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. So I'm going to open up with an opening question from each of you that might have you reveal a little more about yourselves. So Alissa, when I first called you to see if you wanted to talk to me about some work we're going to be doing on the subject of economic equity, opportunity, hardship, you told me the story about how you came to your current role. And I love it because it is itself a story that has an intergenerational kind of backstory. So give us a little bit about how you came to this work.
Yeah, so I met Barbara Ehrenreich in I don't know what, 2012, and I was working on a film called The Last Clinic, and it's about the clinic at the center of Dobbs. And in Jackson, Mississippi, I was producing and writing, and it was directed by Maisie Crow, who's a great film director. And I just was like, she started a nonprofit. She didn't have a lot of money. EHRP was a teeny startup, but she offered us some funds. And more importantly, we had like a hour-long conversation about the origins of the reproductive rights movement, about Jane. She knew the people in Jane, which, if anyone knows, it was like this underground network that provided reproductive care to women who needed abortions before 1973. And she just knew a ton. She'd written a book on midwives few people remember this is like her first book. So she had all this like kind of alt feminist medicine knowledge, in addition to understanding labor and poverty and work and some of the stuff I would be encountering in Mississippi when I went there. So it was just an incredible conversation. It was sort of a bit like falling in love. Like I was like, I'm meeting not only my idol, but like the perfect person to kind of do this kind of change with, and do the kind of change, reporting change, nonprofit building change, labor movement change, feminist change. And so it was incredible. She was 72 at the time. So it was like, at that point, I think I was 38 or 39. And I just had this bond with her, and people were like, oh, she's like a mother to you. And it was almost like more like she became a kind of spouse. And I don't know if this is something you see a lot of in your cross-generational conversations here, but we were partners. We weren't just, it was like, I can get more into how that worked, but we were making this nonprofit together. So it was like our child.
Maybe talk about the mission, because had she started this organization before you met her?
Yes.
And what is the mission of the organization?
So, okay, it's called the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. She came up with it after 2008, when the recession wrecked a number of professions, including journalism. A lot of like kind of precarious middle-class professions started to really disintegrate, and journalism in particular, because of ad dollars, technology, private equity ownership, a whole bunch of factors. And so a lot of people couldn't pay to be part of the media anymore. They couldn't, unless they were wealthy, they weren't participating. And a lot of newspapers were laying people off too. So that you have ghost newspapers, you have news deserts, 27% of news sites are in the majority of the country, and 73% are on the coast. So you have chunks of this country that don't have coverage. So she set out to create that, to sort of address this. I came in like a year maybe, or 9 months after she had founded it, and then helped her build it up. It was a really small organization. Our mission is to get reporting on inequality out there, poverty, inequality, getting reporters who've experienced financial hardship, writing and taking photos and making films, and finally to change the media. So the media includes these voices and this kind of work. So it's like a 3-part project.
Yeah, I want to go back to your relationship with Barbara and more of the work you do, but Alex, let's let you introduce yourself a little bit. How did you come to the Economic Hardship Reporting Project? How did you meet Alissa, if Alissa was your entry point? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this was like the second leg of the pandemic. I had recently recovered from COVID in New York, and then one of my best friends passed away from it. And I was really kind of just done with New York during this time, because of everything that was going on. It was just overwhelming. My parents needed me to come and take care of them for a while, because they're elderly. They live in the South. So I left New York and I moved down there with them, and I helped take care of them for a while. And I found myself just really overwhelmed with the stress of taking care of these people. I have no medical or elderly care training. So I found myself in this position where I didn't really have anybody to talk to or look to. And so I just got back into writing and started writing essays. And I came across a bit of a call out for EHRP. They were asking for stories about economic hardship. And so I reached out to the editor, Deborah John Lee. She got back to me, and that's how I got involved with the project. And then I met Alissa sometime later, but yeah.
Alex, I know like mentorship is a huge part of your story. You've written recently in an article about Fast Company about one of your writing mentors. who happens to be a writing teacher that I took a class with many, many years ago, Sue Shapiro, someone we both know who's mentored quite a lot of people in our profession. And can you tell a little bit about that experience and what happened when you showed up in her writing class? How did you find your way to that writing class?
Well, after I got out the Navy, I got out during the height of the recession, and I couldn't get a job, even though I had training in IT. I was trained in equipment that's only found in the military, so nobody would hire me, and I sort of lost myself trying to find work and trying to be happy, and ultimately I ended up homeless. Wound up in New York, going through the shelter system, being bounced around between shelters and the SRO. I was trying to find happiness and tell stories, because I've always been a writer, but I've had points where I pretended not to be a writer because I didn't think you could make money as a writer. So I did other things. I did this stuff, go into like tech and all of this, do the stuff that you're supposed to do, not the stuff that you're meant to do. So I did a lot of that. And eventually I decided I need to go back to college. I need to learn. I need to be better. So so I applied. Once I got into an SRO, I applied to multiple colleges. I got into the new school, and then that's where I met Sue Shapiro. I took her class just because I was interested in writing for New York City magazines and newspapers. And in that class, I ended up getting my first clip, which was in the New York Times. And then after that, that was a wrap. I was hooked. I'm like, I can't do anything else anymore. This is what I do now. This is me now. So that's kind of what that's kind of like how it started.
Yeah. Alex, I feel like you talked about how that was a little while ago. Do you feel like you're ready to start kind of finding the next generation of writers who may need that kind of mentorship?
Yeah, I as often as I can, I try to help writers. It doesn't matter what age they are, because the older I get, the longer that I do this, I realize how difficult it is to be a writer, to be a journalist is a struggle, because you got to think about it. If you want to do this, put your passion and your love into love of writing and love of writing about people and things. You might find yourself in a scenario where you're not getting paid for like 2 years or more, and and it's so upsetting, especially because I know how much love and effort goes into this thing. You put your heart into writing, and when it doesn't love you back, it can be devastating. So I try to help as many people as I can, because I know what it's like to be alone in this profession and not have anybody. And I also know what it's like to have everybody on your side. Thank you, Sue. Gotta always thank her. Thank you, Alissa. Thank you, Marci, for everything you guys do. And um, you know, just spreading that love and helping share these stories. That's the best. That's the best part.
Hey, Alissa, when we talked, you talked a lot about particular kind of stages of journalism. Like, I know the whole model is broken, and you are trying to make sure that people who are covering poverty, which doesn't get covered enough, and as it is, can make a living wage, and that people with lived experience can be the ones we hear from. But I know you've done a lot of specific work to tell the stories and to support older journalists who may have aged out of the profession or are facing ageism, as well as people who are breaking in, who are usually going to be younger. Can you just talk a little bit about those particular life stages and what's going on there, and how maybe we can, through an interconnected model, like support one another?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first I just want to give props to Alex for two of the amazing things he said. Writing won't love you back, and then the other, do the stuff you're supposed to do, not the stuff you're meant to do. They're both like unbelievable. They're like ready for your embroidery project or Chipotle bag or whatever. It's like really good. Anyway, yeah, so the Ray Suarez, for instance, is a legendary newsman, and like Alex is like another one of my, like, I don't know what to say, like I feel like collaborators, is that fair? That I really value, and part of both of them are incredibly charismatic and talented as well. So Ray had setbacks later in life. He was in his
Ray, for those who don't
I'll back up. Ray Suarez, PBS host, you know, NPR, winds up on Al Jazeera, is now seen as too progressive in some ways, is laid, I forget whether he resigns or is laid off, but he, anyway, hits a bump in the road in his 60s. He's had cancer. He breaks a tooth and he cannot afford to get dental care. He doesn't have dental insurance. But I mean, he does have, like, he owns his home. I mean, he's got certain kinds of assets. This is a familiar story for people in the cogeneration world, where you may be an older American who's had a career in the past, but you're no longer as easily hireable or desirable, even though he's still so amazingly skilled. So he comes to us and becomes part of our board, but then ultimately writes an essay about his experiences falling through the media, falling down through the media, not being hired, going to tons of job interviews. And this guy's a legend. And so that was interesting. And I sort of created these 2 radio shows around him called Going for Broke, season 1 and season 2. He's the host. Also a film series on The Intercept called Insecurity, where he's also like on camera. He's like seamless. You just like, it's crazy. I'm like, how is this person not getting like tons of work still? But he has an amazing line in one of our shows where he says Latino meant young. And it was something I hadn't thought about, but there's a lot of ageism, not only in journalism, but sometimes in journalism that is oriented to specific identities, right? It's like, yeah, Univision, a lot of those folks are very young, the newscaster.
Meaning like when people say they want to hire Latino talent, they don't mean what he.
They don't mean a Puerto Rican guy who's 67, you know, at least that was his experience. So, you know, no matter how brilliant he is. So I thought that was something really important. I mean, a number of our other fellows and grantees are in their 50s, 60s. One of them, John Koopman, we also have him on our radio show. He had covered the toppling of the statue at Furta Square, I think, for the San Francisco Bay Guardian. He was a newspaperman for 20 years. He also had experienced layoffs, and then he winds up driving, working in a strip club, driving an Uber. And so he too, I tried to we got him work, and we started trying to bring him back into media because he's insane talent also. But yeah, I mean, the numbers are there for like how many older journalists are getting laid off that support what I'm saying. But there's also a difficulty for people Alex's age and younger, because they didn't even have that time that some of these guys had. They had, you know, we had at least people in their 50s and 60s had the end of the golden age, the sort of the bittersweet memories, right? The $1, $2 a word, you know, all that kind of thing. You know, you could sell books for a decent amount. There are fact checkers. You know, I worked as a fact checker, but now in media, a lot of it's skeletal. And so younger people don't even have that dark nostalgia, I guess. So these are the 2 groups that I'm primarily working with at EHRP, people Alex's age and people in their later 50s and 60s.
There's just one other thing about your model that I want to make clear that really struck me when I read about your history and your founding story, is that this, talking about nostalgia and looking back, is that this was born with a nod to the WPA projects, right? And kind of paying people to tell the stories of our country, right? So can you just talk a little bit about that idea of supporting artists and writers in their lived experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Barbara and I were very shaped by James Agee and Walker Evans and this whole period of 1930s journalism, which the Farm Security Administration and the WPA, where 6,600 writers were sent out to create oral histories. They include Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, again, Evans and AG, and, a lot of other people I'm not even thinking of, to take photos of mining communities. Sometimes there'd be poems, oral histories, reportage, and this was all supported by the federal government. And then ultimately, sometimes I believe in the 40s, it became state governments that supported it. And it created this renaissance of not only writers and photographers getting a space to become themselves, honestly, and maybe seeding even more the career of someone like Zora Neale Hurston, but also got these stories out there. So it was, again, like ours, is a double-pronged approach where you're like, yeah, these are stories of Appalachia or, the Mississippi Belt or whatever that weren't being told. They were about, often about poverty and struggle, work, and labor. And also beautiful things about America, but that were not being seen and not being reported about. And then also the writers were benefiting and the photographers. I feel like getting those two things has a multiplier effect that I think we're going for, right? EHRP is, Alex is, I am, help the people and also get the stories out.
Right. So Alex, we've been talking a lot about the world of journalism, but you have spent a lot of time in the world of veterans, as a veteran of the Navy and someone who's tried to navigate the VA system. You have a lot of experience with how hard that is, how challenging that is, the struggles that veterans are facing. So I'd love it if you could just share a little of, I know people haven't yet, we're going to be sharing your writing, but people who haven't yet read a lot of your stories, can you just talk a little bit about some of that frustrations and if there are any bright lights you saw in kind of the networks you encountered as you were navigating the whole system as a veteran, trying to find your way to support?
After I got out the Navy and then I started going to the VA, I had to learn pretty quickly that the VA wasn't really there to help me. I had to, in order to navigate the VA, I found that I had to talk to veterans who had done it instead of the people who actually work for the veterans, which it felt kind of cheap to me, because when I experienced, what I experienced was that all of these older veterans, they had to go through a series of abuse by the people who worked at the VA and the government itself. And then you had a lot of guys who were just there and bitter, upset because they weren't getting treated for the things that they needed to get treated for. And obviously, if this is the only form of healthcare that you have, you're going to feel that way. You're going to feel like, why am I here? What do I have? What is my purpose? Why am I serving in this world in general? Why did I serve to begin with? So I found that having a group of people within the VA is so important. It's so pivotal to understanding that you have to rely on somebody in order to get a lot of the things you deserve to get, the things that they promised you before you even left the military. So navigating the VA that way, it taught me a lot about what I had to do in circumstances where the VA wasn't going to give me something that I desperately needed.
It seems like another example where those older vets were showing you the ropes, and in a way, you're sharing what you've learned with everybody through your writing, people of all ages, because you have been sharing what it's like to navigate that system. That's for sure. We already have some questions coming in, and I just want to say, there's one that feels really relevant, and Alissa, I'm feeling like you may have some ideas on this. Can you comment at all on the Screen Actors Guild strike, and if or how ageism might be tied to the economic challenges people are feeling right now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think ageism is. I think things like, people 60 and older, at least last time I checked, were like the fastest growing age segment in the student loan market, which is pretty crazy, you know. So there's burdens, there's economic burdens, there's ageism from employers, but then there's also economic burdens that are specific to people who are older, often, as I said, with student loans, paying for their kids' loans and their own loans. And yeah, just generally, you know, a lot of these professions like the one that we're in, but also like IT or even accounting, you know, are so dependent on being up to the moment in technology and understanding CMS, in understanding what audiences want, right? I mean, and this also affects people. Somebody asked a question about the WGA screenwriters, and we've actually just supported somebody writing a piece about that. But, you know, obviously Hollywood's youth oriented to begin with, but then, you know, are they going to get what the new audience wants with like shorter attention spans and different platforms, right? And like hiring for people who can, you know, kind of cultivate a Gen Z audience. And then so there's ageism there. But yeah, I mean, in journalism specifically, I mean, you know, and publishing, I think recently Penguin Random House just laid off like 10% of their older editors, or took that layoff, they took a buyout, but it was still like, this is, you know, it's a real changing of the guard. And some of those people were in their 60s, right? And there's a lot of information that and institutional knowledge, collective knowledge, that I feel is like really important to maintain, especially in the written word, the culture of the written word. You know, there are ways in which, I don't know, conventions of the past are incredibly important to retain. And I mean, I could get into that too, but like, not just like, can they handle the CMS? Do they know how to do an SEO or like a tweet that's going to get audiences or create a clickbaity article or whatever? But are they able to really understand how to construct a long form article? And some of this is, or write a book that's rigorously researched, and some of the things that were just kind of more of a mainstay when I was coming up, you know.
Two things. So I just want to make the person who asked about Hollywood, I do want to point out that one thing we're hearing a lot is that younger people are feeling the same kind of ageism. Younger people in Hollywood who are, you know, stuck in this assistant level, who are underpaid for years and trying to kind of make it in Hollywood, are finding that they can't even afford to live anywhere in LA, near LA. So there is, like you said, in journalism, there's a problem like at the beginning and at the end of a career. There's this, you know, joke that there's this like sweet spot of 10 years where people are finally situated to work, and what happens at the entry level and what happens later on. So I want to move a little bit to, speaking of sweet spots, what we are really trying to work on here at CoGenerate, which is your model is deeply rooted in cross-generational partnerships and what we can all, why we need each other, why we are, as you say all over your book, Alissa, interdependent and not independent. So I guess my big question for the two of you is, in the systems that you cover, Alissa, which I know is like every part of the economic landscape, and for you, Alex, the systems you have interacted most closely with, maybe the world of veterans and services involving housing, housing insecurity. Where do you see any moments where there might be some cross-generational innovations that might be able to address the issues we know and tap into the talents of people, older and younger people particularly? So your model in journalism is a great one to build out from. Can you each think of any examples in the work that you've done where you see opportunity for that kind of interdependence?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I don't know, running a nonprofit, like I definitely, I welcome, by the way, if there's people out there that want to have conversations around nonprofit management, developing it institutionally, HRP, like I've got a lot from conversations with people who've done this a lot longer than I have, because this was not my original work. It was obviously I was a writer and a author and so forth and an editor, but I hadn't run a nonprofit. But what I see and in my writing, this intergenerational work is, you know, things like workers' cooperatives, which is something I write about in my book. I've seen older people They're not much older, but they'll create a co-op in a nonprofit setting. And a workers' co-op means the workers own their cooperative. I mean, they own their labor. So if it's like a rideshare cooperative, workers cooperative, the drivers and I interviewed some of these guys, the drivers will own a part of the app. So if you're riding an Uber gets like 25 to 40% of the ride. In the app, the proportion's much higher, the percentage they get, and they have ownership, and they feel like they're better treated, right? They have some sort of pride. And the people who start these things tend to be kind of nonprofit do-goody types that are older. And I thought that was really interesting. And like this was also definitely like a cross-class partnership too often, you know, so they might be, there's a place called Chai Fresh in Chicago that I profiled, where some of the women had done time and they had gotten out, and then they had become worker owners in a catering company in Chicago. And the woman who started it was, I think they're elder, although some of these women were close to middle age probably. And they now were part of this worker cooperative. And again, it was like a do-goody thing, but it had really changed their lives as workers. So that was an example of something I thought was very imaginative. I was very impressed by. Yeah.
We've seen, by the way, we've seen a lot happening in the care space where you have, and as a mom, I know you've dealt with this a lot, like kind of realizing that you can trade care with others in your community. But often we found, like we've seen initiatives where there are grandmother age people with energy to give who want to kind of offer up some time with other people's kids nearby because they're craving being around children, and kind of that person in the middle generation has something to offer back. And this idea in mutual aid that we may be givers and takers at different times in the—
Yeah, I mean, the mutual aids that I focused on in my book, and sometimes I even think a little bit the EHRP has a little bit of a mutual aid vibe, although obviously their money changes hands, people get funded, which we didn't even mention. If you write for us, you get $1 a word plus expenses. So at least sometimes $1.25 if you heavily reported. So, but anyway, yeah, so mutual aids are another great way, and that's something I reported on, where you have younger people, especially during the pandemic, these were really important in neighborhoods, bringing food, bringing medicine to people in their communities, especially if it's like people were housebound for some reason, bringing, and one of the ones that really impressed me was a local one in my neighborhood, the Prospect Heights Mutual Aid, because they would bring people anything. And I found that particularly moving. Like if somebody is, you know, an elderly person's at home and they said, I want chicken feet because I make a stew, they would like go find chicken feet. Or I want beer. And they would be like, okay, no alcohol. It's like, okay, this is the middle of the pandemic. This person wants beer. This is a mutual aid that is actually about what not just what the giver wants to give, which is one of the problems of charity, right? But it's what the receiver wants to get. So I think that was, to me, and often this was like young, able-bodied people for older people asking for these things. So I was taken by that.
Alex, I know you've been thinking a little bit at the prompting of what where there might be some cogeneration opportunities in the veterans space. What's coming up for you?
Well, I think it's important to not only promote better mental health care, but also to promote togetherness and community, because loneliness is a great way to develop mental health issues. So many vets are just alone. Every holiday, every month, it leads to more bitterness, it leads to more depression, it leads to veteran suicide. There's always that statistic about 22 per day, and that's a huge thing in the veteran space, is hearing about how often we either kill ourselves or how often, something bad happens to us. I always think about that there's always this perception of vets as derelicts and drunks and, oh, he's probably crazy, but there's really never any promotion of togetherness, creating some kind of community space where veterans can gather together, talk about things in a safe space.
Mhm.
You know, more counseling sessions. Group counseling is great. Maybe there should be free classes that that the VA holds that talk about the differences between different generations, so people can better understand each other. They can understand where the grandfather who has kids who don't visit him is coming from, and then the grandfather can understand the younger kid who doesn't understand how the VA works. It's all about just understanding each other and promoting the idea that we're not in this alone. We have to do this together, no matter what our ages are. So uh, I think
Yeah,
those things are some ways.
I was struck also when we talked, Alex, where you explained that, you had to learn the ins and outs of this system from veterans who had been there before you. But some of those very same people might need a little help with some of the tech updates that have happened in the system. And there just seemed like such a natural way to support one another in that kind of mutual need and mutual, ability to give.
Yeah, that was something that was really upsetting to me because, you know, I've been around computers my entire life. You know what I mean? I don't remember a time, except for like in the 90s when we had like real phones and VHS. I can't remember a time where I wasn't closely connected to a computer. So many older veterans, they don't know they don't have that tech savvy. They don't know about the options available to them online or through certain apps. So it would be great to reach out to older veterans and show them stuff. There aren't programs to do that. I haven't, well, at least I haven't seen any. And I know that there are so many creative things that the VA is doing in other places, and other organizations are doing in other places to really promote the idea that veteran health and mental health should be a priority. I always mention my experience with video games. It's no secret I'm a gamer. All right, sorry, but I always mention that because of the benefits that it has proven to have on the psyche of vets with PTSD and other ailments. There's so much research that is going into isolating the trauma that comes from war through a virtual environment so as to bring a distance from the event that happened and the pain that it can no longer cause you. So there's so many tools out there that the VA could be using for, vets of all ages to help them get over trauma. Not to, you don't destroy trauma, you don't destroy it, but you learn how to deal with it in a positive manner. That's the point.
Yeah. And peer therapy is really taking off in a lot of, just peer therapy, group therapy, partially because of cost. But I also think part of what you're saying, Alex, because it's like, it's less hierarchical, right? And who understands you except someone who's been through the kind of something close to what you've been through, right?
Yeah, I just shared Alex's piece in Wired on video games is eye-opening and grounded in unbelievable amounts of research. I want to encourage you all to share your questions for Alex, for Alissa, for our team, because if we have questions, we're happy to kind of move to that section. And I'm soon going to give it over to my colleague, Christina Rodriguez, who wants to kind of open up the conversation a little. And also, we're really interested, are you working on any projects in the economic equity, economic opportunity space that you think have an opportunity for this kind of cross-generational kind of mutual back and forth? We're really trying to find the innovative models out there. So we're interested in what you are all working on and why you kind of came to this conversation, other than we know to hear Alissa and Alex. Yeah, so someone asked, are there cogenerational housing communities? And I can start on that, but I want to hear if Alex and Alissa have run into anything. So we have been covering a lot on the intergenerational housing front. There are many efforts around the country now that have this model where an older person who may own their home, but not have a lot of other resources, and may have an empty nest. They're living by themselves, their children are far away, and they may have space and they may need some help with their house. And often there are younger people who are trying to get a start in a new city who need a place to live. So there are many organizations that are pairing up those two populations so that older people can stay in their homes and younger people can get a foothold. There is also some care and friendship that usually develops along the way in those kinds of relationships. So have you all been running into anything like that?
Well, I mean, we had a big project that was supported by Princeton's eviction lab, run by Matt Desmond, where we sort of were storifying their data, and I could look it up, but we wound up supporting films and articles on innovative kind of eviction proofing housing, like housing that would be owned by multiple people who are lower income or financially struggling, that were nonprofit supported. It ran in the New York Times, and we did it in partnership with Retro Report, so I can share that link soon. That's one thing. I mean, my family actually lives, they're leaving, but they lived in co-housing, intergenerational co-housing off the coast of Seattle for 25 years. So I spent many hours with them, with the kids running free, with the farm in the back, which had pigs, and people who had some disabilities, and older people and much younger people. It was very cool. And they have a group house at the center of it. It's called Vashon Co-housing, where they'd share meals once a week. And this was one of those early, I know Marci and I know people who live like this. We're probably thinking of the same person, but but it's really interesting. This was my uncle, my aunt, my cousins. They brought my grandmother out there before she died. So I saw it up close, and it really changed their lives. And it my cousins are still shaped by it. So I thought it was wonderful.
How about you, Alex? What does this raise for you? I see you nodding a lot.
I was going to do a piece about some of the worst wards of Chicago, where there are lots of Black families that are being displaced because of, everything from redlining to just general meanness of landlords. But some of these people have been in these houses for generations, and they're theirs, but they can't pay, the yearly cost for the land. So there have been groups working to save those houses. And I think there's like the 6th and 13th wards and stuff like that. There are people who are working to save families in those houses who otherwise wouldn't have anybody on their side and would just normally lose their house. And then, and then gentrification has a great angle to move right in. So that's something that I feel more attention should be brought to, because these groups of people who are doing this, working through the local bureaucracy, they need help to save families who have been in these houses for generations. So
Yeah. I mean, that does seem like it may be an area ripe for people who are not family to be sharing homes. Sometimes extended family or chosen family or made family, found family can serve the role that that family is not present. Yeah, so I want to give Christina a chance to introduce herself and see if there's any other questions coming in, but I feel like I've held this space for a while. So Christina, say hi, and I know you wanted to try to get a little more dialogue going.
Yes, thank you, Marci, Alex, and Alissa for that thought-provoking conversation and really like opening our eyes and doors to the topics that are so interrelated and interdependent when it comes to economic hardship. This is the interactive portion of the webinar, and I would love to hear from the audience at this time and really get some of your questions answered. I would love to hear what's resonating with you. I feel like Alissa and Alex have already made some great points, and would love to hear what is on your mind. And lastly, what are you working on? And I'm curious if anybody here has what we would call a cogen model to advance economic opportunity. So we have some time to popcorn those out, and just bear with me as I look through the chat and try to gather all the great ideas that are coming in. Okay. So it seems like there's a lot of interest in the chat here around these cross-mentoring programs, whether it's in the workplace, whether it is through co-housing, like this idea keeps coming up. And I want to bring up this model that Kathy brought up, and she has an idea around a financial cross-mentoring program that would be of value to businesses that are in succession planning. Here it says that it could look like pairing youngers and olders together. And I would love to hear more like what that sparks for you, Alissa and Alex, and if anybody else wants to add to what that program potentially could look like or a problem that it could solve.
So wait, which mentoring program?
If a financial cross-mentoring program that helps with succession planning, so bringing youngers and olders to help solve that issue.
Well, I guess from our perspective, like you need more money to have succession. You know, I feel like cousin Greg now. I'm like, my nose pressed against the glass. No, but I mean, the thing that I feel like I need help with personally running a nonprofit is thinking about succession, and also, you know, getting mentorship from above, and then thinking about creating models to create a multiplier effect with the nonprofit and to keep it going, you know, in a different way long term.
Makes me wonder, Alissa, do you think that was part of Barbara's philosophy when she partnered with you?
Yeah, she did. She's like,
you feel that was happening?
She was like oh God, she was so salty and amazing. And she'd just be like, thank God I don't have to run this thing. You know, you can handle it now. Thank God I found, you know, it's just like very funny. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, like, we both had a lot of ambivalence about being a boss, because we're sort of, we were, you know, very not anti-hierarchical writers, let's just put it that way, in our writing and in our way. And we're also women, and we wanted it to be collaborative. But like, the longer you run something, the longer you realize there's no way there has to be hierarchies in an institution. So I think she was very relieved that, first of all, I was happy to be her collaborator, but also that, you know, I was going to be thinking more concisely and about the long-term survival of this organization. Because yeah, she was very funny. Like, taking her to fundraising meetings, because that's what we do in nonprofits, was quite amusing, because she was like not happy. These are stories for another. Or she'd ask to meet funders in like a midtown diner and would get black coffee and then give the waitress a $10 tip. That would be, and it was the only time this funder probably had ever. They're like, where am I now? Like, what am I? It's very funny.
Oh, thank you for sharing that story, really highlighting the truth around co-generational leadership, and painting that picture for us. I'd like to get this. Yeah. Oh, Alex, yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, tell us.
I had this really goofy idea. I know it's ridiculous, but it's truly American in nature. I had an idea for a reality show where billionaires get together to compete to rebuild a neighborhood, and then whoever wins gets to do that. And the investment is the saved neighborhood works to create a company to fund what they got funded. It's kind of goofy, but
I love
I
it.
thought that would be.
That's so cool.
What I was going to say, like, what have I gotten? I don't know if we're going to have this question about what I learned from Alex, but I think the way he leads in humor and pop culture and into like very serious topics and handles the it's not like, oh, talking about trauma and being a veteran and poverty or whatever, like trying to be a great writer can't be at the same time making jokes like that and like at this like one after the other, that in like sequentially, and like just that sense of humor and the sense of mental flexibility he has around this, and like it's very cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I would love to hear too what you've learned from Alissa.
Oh man, so much. I know that I think the first thing that I learned about Alissa is that she actually cares, so much about her book, Bootstrapped, is the idea that, we have this issue with empathy in America. And we have this, and it's weird because you would think that in a country like ours, that is a melting pot, more people would care to help each other out. But then you have these people, you have certain people in middle America who feel like, well, I did this myself. I got the house and the massive truck and the wife and 2.5 kids. Look at what I did. But who helped you get there? I mean, you might have all of this money, but what about the teachers who inspired you to get to this place? How much money do they have? How did you help them out?
Yeah.
Because they helped you out. So I really took from Alissa the idea that it's not about you, it's about us.
Yeah.
That's something I really appreciate about her, and of course all of the work that she's doing, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the generosity that she has shown me. So
we've also worked on this radio show that everybody should listen to. I'm sure the link is, it's called Going for Broke. And I learned a lot like from Alex in terms of that, because I mean, just your emotional honesty. I don't know. I feel like we're trained. So one of the key ideas in Bootstrapped is the art of dependency. So it's not even interdependency. It's saying that being dependent on others is a state of grace. And it's a craft and a skill. It's not just like I want to be dependent well, kind of thing. I want to be do dependence well, I want to be able to be proud and kind of brag about my dependence, right? Like that I was able to lean on somebody and someone was able to lean on me, that is like something that we should be holding up. And I feel like Alex is really honest about the ways that he has leaned on people and his vulnerability. And I feel like I try to be. So in some ways I want to be like more like you, about like more transparent. Like as a journalist, you're often trained to not be as honest, But definitely, I mean, I'm very dependent. I'm dependent on the voices of people like Alex to make sense of this project, to help us really know what it means to have lived a hard life and to have recovered,
Thank you. I want to get to some questions. There's so many questions. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of them. But here, Alex is this question is for Alex. Stephen is curious how your work in the Navy affected your transition into post-military life, and how did your work in the military affect the work that you do now?
Well, in the first part negatively, and then the second part positively. I my transition from the Navy, I became a different person in the military, and that's something that you don't really think about when you're 18 years old. You think, okay, well, I'm about to embark on this great new mission in my life, and this next phase of my life, and I'm going to be awesome. But it doesn't always work out that way. So I was more bitter. I had PTSD. I couldn't keep a job or a relationship. So it was a negative transition for me. I know that there are a lot of people who they have positive experiences, but not so much for me. What has been good is to write about it, because not only is it therapeutic for me, but it's it's helping others to heal through my healing, because people reach out to me and they say, thank you for writing this piece about, you know, this topic. The entire point of this my writing journey is to give agency to other people. That's what it's always been about. I know that I am writing about me, but it's not for me, it's for the people who don't have a voice to say the things that I'm talking about, because nobody wants to hear about you when you're doing bad. Like, they don't want to hear about that. You have to make them pay attention. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Alex. We are just 3 minutes away from the end, and I feel like we just like scratched the surface in this conversation. There's so much more that we can dig into, and we will be providing links to all the things that were mentioned today and additional work that Alissa and Alex are doing for everyone here. But before you leave today, I would love for you to take a moment to get your feedback on this poll. This helps us shape future conversations. And here's the poll, just 2 short questions. And once you're able to answer that question, we will be closing out the webinar. And I would love to hear one final thing from Alissa and Alex that you want us to take away with us today.
Well, I feel what I want to take away from you all is I want to have an age specific, some kind of age specific project, like, you know, around, you know, aging reporters, or reporters who are maybe try to find a few reporter mentors to work with our fellows, let's say, and not just their editorial staff at EHRP, but maybe a deeper way, like give them advice on the industry and call them for help, you know. So I've just been now talking to you, I'm thinking more generationally, which is not, I usually think more kind of economically. So, but which is always also generational, obviously, as we know, but like, that's been incredibly helpful to me. And yes, everybody should go to economichardship.org. I'd love to hear from people, especially around the organization. And thanks again.
And Alissa, as you do that, just remember what you two have seen. Like, it is so clear that the youngers can learn from the elders and vice versa. It is never going to be one way in this.
Right, exactly. Like, yes, what younger reporters I could pair with what older editors. Yes, but no, but just have like a age specific framework for something within our project. That's what I'm getting from this. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that what I would like to leave people with is this idea that we need more voices. We need the essayist. The American essay is so important to it's so integral to the narrative of the history of America, because we have seen that that the media whitewashes stories, it blacklists people, and sometimes it misconstrues facts on purpose. So I think it's important to have more essays, more stories telling the rest of the world that no, the media was incorrect when they reported this. This is what actually happened because I was there. So this is why you need to understand my plight in our society. I would encourage more people to become writers, become storytellers, tell the stories that other people can't tell. Yeah.
Yeah, journalism is the first draft of history.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both Alissa, Alex, and Marci, for this wonderful conversation and for the audience engagement today. And we hope to see you soon at another event.
And
Thank
we'll all be
Thank
meeting you both in all the places you write, but especially at EHRP.
Okay, thanks again.
And Alissa.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thanks.
Good care.